Here's an excerpt from an interview I did with Jim O'Shaughnessy. Now, if you're not familiar with him, he's an extremely successful investor. He runs his own asset management company, O'Shaughnessy Asset Management, in Connecticut in the US. And he's also published various books, the most interesting of which I think is What Works on Wall Street, which is now in its 4th edition. He also has a fascinating podcast called Infinite Loops, and in that you'll see how broad his interests are. It goes well beyond finance. Now, his approach to investing is based on something called quantitative analysis, and someone who uses that approach is called a quant. So you'll hear us talking about quants in the interview, and that's a background that we both share. And the quant approach to investing looks at fundamental attributes of a company, such as how much earnings it's generating, or how much dividend it's paying, or how much debt it has, all of the things that you might read on a company's public reports. And what Jim's book does is it goes back in time and it finds the attributes of companies which work best. Now, the focus of this video is Bitcoin, and Jim brings a really unique perspective to it, which draws on his interests in psychology, but also investing in things like art. If you enjoy this video and you want to support us, then you can always join our YouTube community. It's very easy. It's just one click and it's via YouTube directly. So here's Jim talking about Bitcoin. I guess one of the things I'd love to ask you, because I saw you interview, is it Adam Pompliano?
Yes.
And you were so kind of open-minded when you were talking to him, because I mean, my background is kind of on the quant side as well, but for fixed income. Mm-hmm. And as fixed income quants, we always used to joke about perpetual zero coupon bonds, which by definition are worth nothing, right? So right. It's like, you know, you hand over your money and you get nothing back ever. So how much is you know? So, you know, when I see Bitcoin, I just see something which generates low cash flows, which are just worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. And, you know, it's kind of like a millennial version of gold, which is pretty similar. So how do you look at things like crypto and gold? I mean, if you have your quants hat on, for example.
So if I have my quant hat on, I don't understand either, because there is not a steady stream of information about how they get priced, what they pay out because they don't pay out. So the use cases are pretty much worthless to a quant. The reason I try to remain open-minded about everything is because I think that premature certainty is a real villain in thinking about things. So, in fact, I was just writing a piece for Twitter called "The Thinker and the Prover," a simplification by a Dr. Orr. Who it's wrong, of course, because that isn't the way the brain really works, but it's very useful to look at it that way, right? The thinker thinks something, and then once it decides, the prover proves it. And, you know, that's the prover's job, and the prover does that job very, very well. So this gets us into, so how do I look at Bitcoin? How do I look at gold? Well, I think that, and this sounds a little out there, but I think that the value of almost anything is what the perceiver finds in it. And by that I mean, ultimately, human beings believe or don't believe in things, right? And I think that when a majority of human beings believe in something, it becomes part of consensus reality. Consensus reality changes. And it used to change very slowly. It used to be that generation after generation after generation could be born and die. And the great-grandson had exactly the same set of beliefs as his great-grandfather. That's not happening anymore because, again, of the weapons of mass destruction, of universal ability to communicate with each other. So, paper currency. what is the dollar bill in your pocket worth? Nothing. I mean, its intrinsic value is zero. And the only reason that currency works is because we all believe in it. And if we didn't believe in it, this economy wouldn't exist, right? There would be no iPhone, there would be no Zoom, there would be, because you've studied this. If you're bartering, a barter economy really just, how many chickens do I have to pay you for that Zoom time? It's not going to work, right? So we have a very deep collective belief in the idea that currency, be it euros or dollars, has value. Objectively, they don't. They are a means of exchange, which does have value, but and there is where I becomes an edge case for Bitcoin, right? For me, if consensus reality changes enough whereby people become pessimistic about, say, the US dollar. So the US dollar is the king currency. I always kind of smile when people say it's that fiat currency is worth nothing. And, I'm putting all my money in Bitcoin. And I'm like, and I joke and people get mad at me, but I'm like, well, is Bitcoin backed by the world's most powerful military that's controlled by a political class that has repeatedly demonstrated its willingness to use it? And so, there are secondary and tertiary knock-on effects. The US dollar has this value not only because we're the uni power, and despite all of our screw-ups, we still are. Virtually every black market is priced in US dollars, for example. I was just, we were having a little discussion on Twitter earlier about Bitcoin. And, I asked a serious question. I travel a lot, or at least did pre-COVID. And I love Africa. And so I go there a lot. And the last time I was there, which was in the fall of 2019, I tried a little experiment. And the experiment was, you want to tip your guides and everything. And obviously they're not declaring that. And so I said, I can give you Bitcoin or I can give you US dollars. 100% US dollars. Nobody wanted Bitcoin. And, obviously that's a single observation and it's not valuable in terms of research because you got to iterate that a million times in a million different locations for that to have any meaning. But I guess the edge case for Bitcoin is if a majority of people on the planet lose faith in their governments, which looks like it's kind of happening, then Bitcoin becomes a little more interesting because it can be, it's got a lot of really cool things. You can put it on a thumb drive and take your fortune with you, right? Used to be diamonds and a variety of those things. But we always get back to the idea, okay, but how bad does the world have to get for that to happen? And if the world is that bad, and I'm not being, it's going to sound like I'm being flip, and maybe I am a little, but wouldn't you rather have guns, ammunition, and pharmaceuticals and or foodstuffs or things that people really actually need, right? So I don't know. I think that I'm very interested in watching the Bitcoin debate. I think you're absolutely right that it is a investment, an asset that is determined wholly by our opinion of it. But so's art, right? I collect art, and so one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating is art is entirely determined by human likes and dislikes, right? Van Gogh couldn't give paintings away. His brother was the only one who ever bought one from him. And now, today, bang, right? Van Gogh, 200 million, boom. So I think that we need to broaden our thinking. It's pretty easy to make that case about Bitcoin, but that's true of a lot of other things too. It's definitely true of art. It's definitely true to a certain extent of many other asset classes, right? That don't throw off any sustainable cash flow, that lack all of the hallmarks that a quant might be interested in investing in. And yet, art has been a pretty amazing investment over time. Now you get it wrong, right? And so it's kind of like VC in that respect. We did a kind of a review of all of the paintings and sculptures and whatnot that we own. And, probably 20% of them have all of the appreciation that our collection has. The other eight, it's the 80-20 rule. And, power laws, 80-20 rule, it rules all around us. And so I am still open-minded about Bitcoin. I love watching the discussions. They get passionate, and I think that's, doesn't help. And the thing that I would worry about is you don't want to become, what do they call it? A Bitcoin maximalist. I'm probably using the term wrong. My friend Pomp would correct me. But, I maintain still, I don't know. I'm still watching it. I'm still open to it. We have a small investment through O'Shaughnessy Family Partners, which is our family office, in a Bitcoin hedge fund. And we did that because we wanted to watch it in real time. And I'm a big believer that you're not going to pay attention unless you have skin in the game. And, I might allocate a little directly to Bitcoin just to watch it without any expectation that it's going to, soar or fall out of bed. But I do think it's interesting. And I do think that, who knows? Who knows if humanity decides that governments have really jumped the shark, you could see things like Bitcoin. You could see things like a lot of those types of investments that would have been laughed at 20, 30 years ago doing okay. I don't follow it, but I understand that it's in a huge rally right now, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
I did a
people
couple of
get
videos
crazy
on it, so I'm kind of aware of it, because every time I discuss it, if I say anything negative, I just get completely slammed, and it's almost like a religion. And if I say something about gold, exactly the same. All the gold bugs descend on me in the comments section. It's just
well, your observation is absolutely correct, and I think that another thing that we're seeing right now is this. I have said repeatedly that this period that we're living through is an emotional plague, and people are getting infected with mind viruses, and that can be very serious because they are behaving like devout followers of religions. And devout followers of religions are almost by definition dogmatic. And when you're dogmatic, you've turned your brain off. And I'm sure I'll hear about this, but the fact is, you're right about gold bugs. You're right about Bitcoin fanatics. I'm not a fanatic about anything, and it's kind of like I've done so much better by keeping my mind completely open than the opposite. So dogmatic behavior is not good, and I don't care which team you're rooting for, right? Whether you're the anti-gold bug who is, has the fervor of you're an idiot, or you are the gold bug who thinks, you're an idiot. This is, there's more heat than light there, as with most dogmatic people.
Yeah, that's why I love your approach, because you're always kind of talking about base rates, evidence-based. investing, which is really refreshing when you've got so much dogma out there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So you see what I mean about him having a really fresh perspective on Bitcoin. I think he doesn't approach anything with a dogmatic set view. He always bases his view on data, and he actually invests in Bitcoin to learn about it and in order to have some skin in the game. Because as he says, that's a great way to learn about something. Now, if you have views about Bitcoin, please share them in the description below. Keep it polite, keep it non-dogmatic, and keep it broad-minded. But I'd also like to interview someone who's an expert in crypto. So if you do have any suggestions for that, I'd love to know. And if you are Adam Pompliano, I'd love to interview you. But any expert I think would be interesting, just to give us that broader perspective. And remember that if you support us on Patreon, you get all sorts of goodies, including lots of exclusive content, such as the full unedited version of that video with Jim. But there are also many explainers, but also our Sunday evening calls, which are interactive and very friendly, where we can discuss anything in finance. So to learn more about those goodies that you get as a member, then you can click on a link in the description below me or beside me. And as always, thank you for listening.